it's a shockingly simple math to early retirement, and it literally just translates how your savings rate to how many more years you have to work. And if I was 25 and someone told me I had to work for however many more years, 40 years, I'd be like, wait a second, this sucks.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the Gentle Art of Crushing It show, where we focus on learning and sharing with our listeners all there is to know about how to create success in our lives. This show stands on the shoulders of giants. Our mission is to empower and inspire our listeners to create the life of their dreams whilst having a blast in the process. Let's celebrate life together. Welcome to the show.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of The Gentle Art of Crushing It. My name is Derek Felch. I'll be hosting this episode, and I am joined today by a very special person. Her name is Meghan Hunter, and she is a travel writer, an entrepreneur, a real estate investor, a world traveler, pretty much outclasses me in everything. So I will stop talking and introduce you, Meghan, and let us know a little bit about you.
Hi, Derek. Thank you. That was a very generous introduction.
I try.
And I don't know. Yep, all of the things that you mentioned. I love traveling. I love real estate investing. I love personal finance, and credit card, travel rewards, hacking is kind of my forte. But all of those sort of interests and loves, are related in one way or another.
Okay.
So yeah, my daughter and I just moved to Portugal.
Okay.
Another fun fact.
Wow.
Yeah.
So let's talk about credit cards because I only learned about this a few years ago, and I feel like I learned about it about the time everyone else learned about it, so the early adopters really benefited. I've done it somewhat. I'm kind of a lazy credit card travel hacker, and I just want someone to tell me what to do. How did you get started on it? Like, what even got you involved in it?
Yeah, so the first time I was kind of exposed to the travel rewards world, I was working, and a coworker mentioned that he had an American Airlines credit card, and wanted to go on a trip to Peru. And he's like, "Hey, if you can get this card and earn these miles, you can get a free flight." And so I had already had like a love of travel prior to that. And this was in, oh gosh, I don't know, 2008-ish. So yeah, once I kind of realized, wait a second, so I can travel, something I love to do, and do it for free and save money at the same time. It was just kind of like a rabbit hole after that. It was like people get with real estate investing, you get obsessed with it. Yeah. And so it was just, reading the blogs that were available at the time. And yeah, just kind of became an obsession. Like, okay, this will allow me to travel in the way that I want to, without breaking the bank.
Okay. So without embarrassing myself too badly, the way that you get started is obviously the one I'm most aware of is there's bonuses. So I see a travel card. It says, hey, if you spend $4,000, we'll give you this many miles or points or cash back.
Yes.
Okay, so I've done that, and sometimes that seems overwhelming to me. Like, where am I going to spend $4,000? So how would you say someone should get started or explore this possibility? How does it work for them?
So I guess one of the easiest ways is when I'm talking to friends and family, is if someone has like a particular trip in mind and they're like, hey, I'm planning my honeymoon. I want to take my family to Hawaii. And they have this idea. And with a specific idea, it's kind of, in a way, easier to work backwards. Because then you can look at, okay, where do you live? What's the closest airport? Then that kind of funnels us down into, this is what miles or points you should be earning, because all of those factors kind of play into what the best card for you is.
Okay.
So that, again, being like where you want to go, where you live, what your monthly budget is, like in spending patterns. If I'm talking to someone that owns a business and they spend a lot on online marketing or at office supply stores, that again will impact like what I would recommend as being the best card, because they're all different. So they all earn different types of points or miles. and at different rates on in different categories. So yeah, it's a personal thing with what your ultimate goals are in deciding which card is the best or cards multiples are best
Okay.
for each individual.
So, and then are there resources you'd recommend online, places people can go to check this out? That would be. I'm always a cynic about where people have to pay for things. So, like, are there
Yeah,
places you would direct people to go to
yeah.
learn more about that?
Yeah, so one of my favorite sites, there are quite a
Okay.
few, and Travel Freely is a great site, and it's also a tool that helps you organize your credit cards that you
Okay.
have, and they track your bonuses, your spending. They track like each bank has different rules. So, for example, with Chase, they call it the Chase 524 rule,
Okay.
and you can only have an X number of accounts within 24 months. So this Travel Freely site, you can not only like learn about different cards, but once you start playing the game, you can, and again, it's free. You can, have an account with them, upload the cards that you have, and they'll send you little reminders like, hey, your Chase card has a $300 travel credit that you need to use by the end of this month. Like, don't forget. So, not only do they have great resources for like where to start, but it helps you manage everything once you start, once you get into it.
Okay. Do you think?
And then there's upgraded points, the points guide. There's all kinds of, popular places that people go
Okay.
nowadays.
So you should be able to find information without having to pay for it. You think?
Yes,
Okay.
most definitely. Yeah, yeah. There are paid services. Usually those are either like award booking tools where you want to fly to France in June of 2023 and you have this many points and you pay someone to find those flights for you. And usually they aren't, it's not, I mean, I don't think of it as a really terrible investment. Like usually you'll pay 200 bucks ish. And again, if it's a big occasion and you're saving $10,000 on a business class flight, like who cares? You're kind of um you don't have to learn the ins and outs
Right.
of the miles and points world. You just pay somebody to do it for you.
Okay.
So yeah, those exist too.
Do you think the credit?
And can make sense
Do you think
for
the credit
certain.
card companies are getting wiser? Are the rules of the game, as you called it, changing?
They're always changing.
Okay.
So everybody that kind of plays this game, it kind of look at it like cash sitting under your mattress.
Okay.
Like don't ever hold, or even in your bank account. Don't ever, like hoard points and miles because they're in a sense always being devalued or
Okay.
changing. So you just never know. It's, you're always supposed to kind of be, use them or lose them.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, years ago, I'm not that long ago, really, maybe 5-ish plus years ago. For example, airlines had fixed award charts. So you knew without a question, like it cost me 60,000 United miles to fly from the East Coast to Europe.
Okay.
And now everything's for most airlines, it's all dynamic and it's based on the cash price of the ticket. So, the number of miles you'll need will very much depend on like what day of the week you're flying, what time of year it is, where you want to go. So it's trickier to play it now
Okay.
than it was certainly 10 years ago,
Okay.
but still very, very lucrative if you get into it.
All right. All right. So you would recommend people at least check it out.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, in my view, like something's better than nothing,
Right.
and you you can go down the rabbit hole like I mentioned before and like be overwhelmed with, but there are all these airlines and there are all these different kinds of points and I spend money at grocery stores, but I also spend money at office supply stores and and then it just kind of becomes overwhelming, like you mentioned.
Right.
But there's a much simpler approach. It's why people love like the adventure card, for example. It earns 2 points on everything and you can go erase your travel purchases. So that's kind of like for the people, their cards where it's like it's better than using a debit card or cash.
Okay.
You might as well be earning
Okay.
rewards for spending that you're making.
Okay.
Now, if you don't ever earn, if you don't ever fly Emirates like first class to wherever,
Right.
who cares? Like, that's not everybody's dream.
Right. Right. Right.
But if you have this amazing vacation with your family to Hawaii, and even if you only save $2,000, well, I'd rather save $2,000 than nothing, you
Right.
know?
Right. And obviously, I'm
Yeah.
I'm
So,
gonna I'm gonna make an assumption here because there's, as I was younger, my personal finance is a big deal to me, and I used to be very anti credit cards. I probably had to turn in my Dave Ramsey card a few years ago, but obviously
yep.
you are paying off these balances monthly, right? I mean, this is not a game to go bury yourself in debt to fly Emirates Airlines
No,
first class. Okay. All right.
exactly.
Right.
Yep. Any interest you accrue will wipe out the value of
Right.
any rewards you earn.
Okay.
It is very much only for those people who can manage their finances and, have a plan in place and aren't the type that are going to see a $10,000 credit limit and go
Woohoo!
have fun with it
Yep.
if
Yep.
they can't pay it
I
off.
totally.
I've seen that happen
Yeah.
before. So it is
Yeah.
like, it's a very important warning to put out there.
Okay. All right. And so is that how you started writing, was about travel, or were you writing before that, or how did that get started?
No, yeah. So the writing thing was very much, I actually saw an ad on Facebook for a job
Oh, wow.
with one of the more prominent Million Mile Secrets. The blog still exists today, but it's owned by another company. So, anyways, yeah, I um, saw an ad, and I was an engineer by trade,
Really?
very
Yeah.
random. Um, but kind of wanted to, well, I'd become obsessed again with the miles and points thing and thought, well, that sounds awesome. I mean, I've done technical writing before. It's very much, um, all the miles and points stuff is like, reading the fine print and translating it into sort of everyday language that people want to read. So yeah, so I applied and got the job and did that for another, I don't know, 7+ years, and I'm still doing it today.
Wow.
So
Wow. And so you also
you never
you
know.
also own real estate. You do a lot of stuff, Megan. Try to keep up here. So you also own real estate. What got you started in real estate?
So, I guess a little bit of just being stupid and lucky at the same
Right. Right.
time. For sure, my mom liked flipping houses growing up. Now, not in the sense that like that was her job or anything. It was more like she could see the potential in a house. She'd fix it up. We'd move in, live there a couple of years, and then kind of like rinse and repeat.
Okay.
She was a nurse
Okay.
for her day job. But I think the intrigue of remodeling homes I certainly got from her.
Hmm.
And then, yeah, the real estate piece came along. The first house I bought, the owners, I was renting like a mother-in-law suite
Okay.
that was attached to the house. And the owners were getting a divorce and randomly knocked on my door one day and said, "Hey, do you want to buy this house?" And
Wow.
I was not at all like looking to buy something. I like to travel, so I kind of like to move around.
Right.
So the idea of like staying in one place never had crossed my mind, really. But I kind of looked at the numbers. Like, obviously, I'm a numbers person, and thought, well, this kind of makes a lot of sense. And it happened to be like a double lot. So I knew there's potential there. And, things just kind of like the opportunity presented itself, and I took it.
Wow.
And then, yeah, and then kind of built things from there. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So what do you own now? What kind of real estate do you have now?
So now I have most are long-term rentals and then two short-term rentals. And yeah, in three different states, Montana, Colorado, and Alabama. Um, and so yeah, it's kind of a strange portfolio, I
Yeah.
guess some would say, in terms of keeping, kind of having one method and sticking to it. But I like to experiment with things, and I think it's actually I have a nice balance between like cash flowing properties and properties that are great like on the appreciation side of
Okay.
things. So
Yeah.
that's something that's always a, you know, a comparison between those two
Sure.
types of
Sure.
markets is always like, what do I do? You know, what's best?
Yeah.
So I kind of went with a mix.
So how did you pick those markets? Like if you're all over, like what made you choose those markets?
So Montana was where I bought my first
Okay.
house, and again, that was just where I happened to be at the time. And knowing it is a popular vacation destination, I that's where my short-term rental is now. And then Alabama, I wanted to get again into more of a cash flowing market and had done a bunch of research, you know, gone on like the bigger pockets forums, listened to podcasts, kind of found those handful of markets that sort of everybody always seems to talk about when they're talking about finding cash flowing markets with like, you know, homes that are 150,000 dollars.
Right.
Like again, when you only have so much money to for a down payment, I couldn't go run and buy a $800,000
Mm,
house somewhere. So,
right.
so yeah, Alabama, Birmingham kind of came up. I found a realtor that I really liked, and a property management company that I liked, and so that kind of helped me narrow down my the market that I was going to work in, and went from there and figured why not?
Yeah.
And I to this day, it's been I guess let's see, I haven't owned them for 2 years, but anyways, I still haven't. I've never seen those houses.
Wow.
So
Wow. So you
yeah,
did you pick the
and
mark
then
did oh go ahead, sorry.
oh yeah, and then Colorado. I was going to say I moved to Colorado after Montana, so
Okay.
that's how that happened.
Okay. So did you pick the market first, then go find the realtor? Did you find I mean, is that kind of how it worked or
It kind of happened a little bit at the same time
okay.
because finding the realtor and the property management company narrowed my decision a bit. So I was looking at like Alabama, Tennessee, some spots in Ohio, some North Carolina. And then, yeah, everyone always talks about, of course, finding your
Yep.
team and people and that sort of
Yep.
thing. And so, again, finding a realtor that I felt comfortable with, the fact that he understood like what I was looking for, my parameters, like an investor friendly realtor. He had worked with other people that I'd spoken to through the Bigger Pockets forum. And yeah, and by the time you've analyzed like 18 million deals, which I'm an over
Yep.
analyzer, so it came to the point where we're just like, look, Megan, you got to pull the trigger on this
Okay.
and just go for it and see what happens.
So all of your properties are managed by other companies, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Short-term rental and long-term
Yeah.
rental.
Yes.
And then you moved out of the country as well.
Yes. Just earlier this year.
Okay.
Yep. I moved to Portugal.
So does it worry you? I mean, I can hear some people, maybe myself included, thinking, "Man, to own property that I've never seen and is in another part of the country, and then I'm going to move out of that country to a different country. Like, how does that work?"
So, yes and no. I have lived next door to one of my properties before, and I pretty sure I prefer the fact that I've never seen the
Okay.
property
Oh,
like I would like. So, there are pros and cons to both of
right.
it. I guess obviously out of sight, out of mind to a certain extent. I did have a tree fall down in the backyard of a house in Colorado like 2 months after I moved here. And it ended up catching like the neighbor's tree on fire because it hit a electricity line. Everything's fine
Right.
now, of course. That's why I can laugh about it. But yeah, I was on the phone at, I don't know, 2 a.m., 3 a.m. because of the time difference. And just telling myself like this is the, I guess, trade-off between me having like to spend 40 hours in an office listening to someone else tell me what I have to do, over the week.
That's a very good
So
point.
try to look at the bright side.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess to answer your question, not, I try not to let it, again, I guess it's the same. I could be vacationing in Europe and something could have happened to
Right.
a house that I own in Colorado. Things happen. And so I guess it is what it is. And I try to sort of put it to perspective and weigh the pros and cons of, the of investing in real estate. Like everybody said,
Yeah.
it's not passive.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. I think I meet
But
people. I talked to a guy a few weeks ago at a real estate meetup, and he's looking at a short term rental, but he doesn't really want to go out of a 3 or 4 hour radius of where he lives. And I feel like that that can limit you, but I totally understand the fear and control. But in reality, like you said, it's not. There's really not a lot of difference between 3 hours and 30 hours or 12 hours. I mean, it can be done as long as you have the right team.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And that's another kind of lesson I had to learn and become comfortable with, or I'm still learning, I guess, since I'm such a DIYer.
Right.
And like have always been like, oh no, I need to save a buck. Like I'll manage because I managed my short-term rental in Montana for a number of years. And granted, it was before like Airbnb became like uber popular or Montana was discovered during COVID.
Okay.
um, and there were the technology wasn't there, like Hospitable didn't exist, so weren't ways to automate things in 2015, 16ish. um but I mean, I have learned like without a shadow of a doubt that just because the way I want to live my life, it like pays dividends to have someone else manage things for you if it makes sense still with the numbers.
Yeah. How
Even if I am losing 20% losing 20% air quotes
yeah.
every month to a manager.
Yeah. How did you find a good, like, what for someone who's looking at management companies, and I know there's this real challenge in the short-term rental business. It seems like the theory is we can self-manage them, when in fact they're probably actually more work than a long-term rental that we encourage people to get a management company
Totally.
for. But how do you find a good management company?
Yeah, so I mean, asking the right questions is really what it comes down to. And just like with anything, if you can find referrals, talk to someone else that has been using them. I did that for the manager I use in Montana. And he happens to own like three of his own short-term rentals. He showed me, like some of his numbers from the other properties he's managed. I was able to speak to those references. He gave me like projections, and I kind of compared those to my own, understanding of the market. So, just figuring out like someone who certainly sounds like they know what they're talking about. Because I feel like there are a lot of, oh, I'll be your manager, and really they're just there to maybe like answer an email or something. But when it comes down to it, you're still kind of doing a lot of the
Right.
stuff that, my manager already had his own cleaning crew. It wasn't like he was outsourcing that. That was part of his business. And yeah, getting to know someone and talking to them and, you know, hoping for the
Yeah.
best to a certain
Yeah.
extent.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it is your best guess that you're hoping for, but and so now you've moved
Yep.
to Portugal. Why Portugal?
Kind of where, well, of course, travel ties into this.
Okay.
The idea that now I'm over in Europe and it's like, a 30 euro flight anywhere
Wow.
in Europe. And they have a visa program that leads to citizenship if you're so inclined. And it's a passive income visa. I believe it was originally sort of geared towards retirees,
Yeah.
like getting a pension or Social Security, because you have to prove passive income. But real estate, like rent, qualifies a
Right.
person for that. And so, yeah, it's just kind of like a new experience. My daughter learning another language at the right age, where hopefully her brain will then be able to learn even more languages, just like a great sort of opportunity for us to just try and experience something new. And if I don't like it, we'll go back to Colorado.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. So what else are you working on now? What other things do you have going on?
Yeah, so let's see. I recently invested in an Amazon store and a YouTube channel.
Okay. So what does that mean?
Um,
Help me understand what that means.
yeah, so I found an operator that kind of handles the day-to-day pieces of managing, like building an Amazon store and managing a store and YouTube channel. They're both different types of businesses, but and this sort of business structure has been around for a while, and of course, Amazon's been around for a
Right.
while, and people having their own Amazon stores. But again, in my quest to be more passive with my investments and not like super hands on and trying to figure out everything, I kind of liken the management company to like, again, a property manager.
Okay.
I can in, use my money and invest to buy the asset and then hand it over to someone else with less effort to manage something. So yeah, it's just like the Amazon store. Part of it is drop shipping. So someone orders a wrench from my store and the operators go in and ship the wrench from like Home Depot to the person that ordered it through my Amazon store, and I make money on the difference in price
Okay.
essentially.
How
And
how
yeah.
did you find out? I mean, how does one go about buying an Amazon store? I didn't know there were. I mean, I knew of Amazon stores. I assumed a lot of them were self-created. Like I decided to do
Yes.
that. So
And totally. And there are plenty of those. And like if you're on any, websites where people are selling small businesses, you'll see Amazon stores listed. And yeah, people have built some people have been at it for 5+ years. They build their store where it makes whatever $400,000 in revenue, whatever the numbers are, and essentially, yeah, they'll build the stores up and sell them to the next operator, just again like you would a house in a sense,
wow.
and or any other type of small business. I mean, it is a business, and there's a way to value it based on the revenue and. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm still like super it's let's see, I think I've owned my store for maybe 3 months now, so it's still in like the building phases. So I
Okay.
can't say like, for sure that it's the best decision I've
Right.
ever made or the
Right.
worst decision I've ever made. But
Yeah. How does someone? I imagine.
the
Oh,
interest,
go ahead. Sorry.
yeah. Oh, I was gonna say the because I compare it to real estate
Right.
because that's the other
Right.
asset that I own. I was like, well, I guess it's less money and less effort to get into one of these than it is to buy a house, and it's like a diversification play, like, and so we'll see.
Wow.
Fingers
How
crossed.
would somebody listening to this find out more information about Amazon stores or buying YouTube channels? Like where would you direct them to go? That again would be a place that
Yeah,
they don't get taken advantage. Because I'm assuming again, like real estate, there's lots of gurus
there
that
are.
will help you buy an Amazon store.
Yes,
So where would you send people to find
yes.
out more about that, or how did you do your research?
Yeah, so I started by a Google search
Okay.
essentially. And I'd looked at Amazon stores, I don't know, 8+ years ago or something, and had done quite a bit of research on how they are operated and run, and like how, if I wanted to start my own, how I would do it. So I kind of knew some of the lingo, and I started setting up meetings with people that I found online, and um, people being like
Okay.
operators or these business entities that run the stores. And then I heard about one of the a podcast I was listening to. They had purchased a YouTube channel and an Amazon store, and they're fairly reputable in the real estate space. So then I called them to ask them for a reference. And again, just like anything, it's like kind of connect the dots, find references, talk to the people, do a little digging, and wound up deciding to go with a certain operator that, for one, they ran, some of the operators only run like one style of Amazon store. There's like a drop shipping model and fulfillment by Amazon model where you're purchasing goods and warehousing them and then selling them, as opposed to like not warehousing any inventory. And there are pros and cons to the different types of stores. But anyways, this operator does both of them, whereas some only do one kind. And then they also had the YouTube channel piece. And so yeah, again, just by kind of doing my own due diligence and asking questions and deciding I was comfortable with this particular operator. So yeah.
That is fascinating. So I'm kind of surmising that your whole goal is to create income as passively as you possibly can.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
I still see a house and I'm like, oh my God, I could like tear that kitchen out and do some tile work because I've done all of that before. And then I remind myself that that is a lot of work and a lot of time, and there are so many places to see in Europe and in the world for that matter. And so, yeah, it's kind of like, okay, I've done that. Like, I'm moving on to the next phase. I'm trying to, figure out like, what is it? Who, not
Yeah.
how, that
Yeah.
everybody keeps saying
Yeah.
nowadays.
No, I think that's important. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what kind of goals, what
Yeah.
targets, what are you working on? What's next? Like what's the future? What are you hoping to do next?
Yeah. So next, I'm going to, I'm in the process building a brand called Work Optional Woman. I have some social accounts up and a blog that I'm about to launch. And, it's going to be a little bit of, my story, like moving to Portugal. And I certainly get a lot of questions about that, like being an expat, the visa process, moving with kids, just, a new life experience. And then I really want to focus on inspiring other women towards financial independence. And of course, picking women specifically.
Right.
It's just like the group of people, obviously. I have a daughter. It's like something that's uber important to me is to instill in her, the idea that she can have control of her finances, her future. And it's just something that I consider to be a very empowering piece of someone's life. And yeah, so I kind of want to spread, what I've learned and the goals that I have, and hopefully find a bunch of other friends that join me along the way.
That
Yeah.
sounds great. So FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early. I'm familiar with that concept. I'm somewhat envious of it. Let me ask you a couple of questions about that. When did you kind of first become aware of that movement?
Yeah. Gosh, I would say maybe 5 years
Okay.
ago. It wasn't that long
Okay.
ago. And Mr. Money Mustache was my first
Yes.
sort of dive
Yes.
into that
Yes.
that world.
That's like the
Yeah.
intense dive into the deep end off the really, really high dive that
It
they don't have at swimming pools.
very much
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
No, he's probably the first person I found, and I'm like, man, this is intense. So 5 years
It is
ago.
super. Yeah, it's super intense. I've always been like frugal by nature,
Okay.
so I guess that's why it resonated with me. The difficult part for me, I guess, was I never had like a tech job paying me hundreds of thousands of
Right.
dollars in my W-2. So, and I'm like, I don't know. I'm still very much kind of a hippie, free spirited heart.
Okay. Okay.
So I was like, I'm just going to travel the world and not pay attention to anything. But because I was so frugal, it ended up being okay. I never made, and because of the travel hacking
Right.
piece and all that sort of stuff, it wasn't like I was like spending absurd amounts of money sort of living my dream, if you will,
Yeah. Well,
in my younger
yeah,
years.
let me ask you a question about the fire movement. That's just, because I think other people would have this question too. So when I started reading it, I probably found it maybe about 6, 8 years ago, maybe a little shorter than that. But I'm married. I have 4 children. I'm now 50, so I found that in my mid 40s. I
Yep.
don't seem to find a lot of blogs or podcasts from the mid 40s couple who discovered fire and then were able to achieve financial independence. So if I'm listening to this and I'm in that camp of like, well, Megan, that's great. If I was 25 and found this, what do
Yeah.
you say to those
Yeah.
people? Like, what could they? I mean, what's
Yeah.
where's the hope? What would you
Yeah.
tell them?
I know. Believe me, I mean, I'm 40. So yeah, in a sense, feel the same way. I'm like, man,
Yeah.
if someone had shown me
Yes.
this when I was 22, and like, again, I think he has Mr. Money Mustache has something like the shockingly simple math to early
Mm-hmm.
retirement, and it literally just translates how your savings rate to how many more years you have to work. And if I was 25 and someone told me I had to work for however many more years, 40 something
Mm-hmm.
years, I'd be like, wait a second, this
Yeah.
sucks. But for whatever reason, that didn't cross my mind. And the internet wasn't as popular as it is right now. So I would say, where's the hope? So I think for me, a lot of it is a lot of the fire stories you hear people, retiring with like $10 million in the bank. Well, if you didn't start investing like when you were two
Right.
and you live a pretty like typical life with, that is difficult.
Yes.
um, for me, what I discovered is there are different levels of fire. So there's like, and people have different names for them, like coast fire or barista fire, and then regular fire, and then fat fire, and everybody's sort of numbers fall differently in those groups. But it really like the whole thing is for me, which I why I named my brand Work Optional Woman, is becoming work optional. So in
Right.
reality, you only need enough cash flow to cover your expenses. And if you're a fairly frugal or, again, like fancy cars, I don't care about them. So I know what my expenses are, and I know how to kind of find ways like travel hacking to do things that I otherwise might not necessarily be able to afford. And so to just kind of like know that and know that, you can, assuming that your expenses are reasonable, cover, your lifestyle with five short-term rentals, or whatever that mix of investments might be. And so maybe the idea isn't to like reach this ultimate fat fire, oh, I have $10 million in the bank by the time I'm 40 or 50. But it's like, look, I buckled down, I figured out how to cover my expenses, maybe with a little bit extra. And so now I have the time to like spend with my family. And if I need more money when I'm 55, and I'll invent something or start a business or whatever, I don't know, it's just kind of having like putting the emphasis on earning your time back as opposed to growing your net worth to tens of millions of dollars. And for me, that kind of like it helps me like say, okay, you know what? This is good. Like I do have enough. I can do the things that I want. I mean, I'm a workhorse
Yep.
anyways, so but but yeah, you realize what's important, and time is the most important thing, and especially when you have kids and they're younger, and eventually they'll be on their way. And so yeah, I would say just to kind of like really be more introspective about what's most important to you. And while all those stories are incredible, like awesome and encouraging, the really fancy stories, there are also those stories like Mr. Money Mustache, or other couples that I've read about. That they have enough invested to live off of $60,000 a year, and yeah, maybe they don't, live in a mansion or whatever, or own fancy cars, but they can hike like whenever they want to, if they want to, or they can like work on their side hustle, or they can, do whatever it is. So yeah, I think focusing on the time aspect for me is what's most important for someone who's not
Yeah,
25
I think that's really. I
anymore.
think that's really. I think that's really wise. I wish I have two children in my mid-20s, and I hope they're listening to what you just said because it. I think when you're in your when you're in your 20s, you don't think about time in the same way. You're in this big rush and hurry, and then the older you get, you're like, man, their time is limited, and it's just being
Yeah.
intentional. And I think I think what I've learned from the FIRE movement is that there's so many different ways people can make improvements to their life financially. It's just having a plan and executing that plan and not always being intimidated or overwhelmed by those other stories because but I think so much of the time
Yeah. Yeah.
we live in reaction with our money or we live for today and we don't think about those little things until it starts, we dig the hole deeper and now we've got to fill that back in. So well, good, Megan. If people want to learn more about you,
Yeah, absolutely.
where can they find out more about you? Do you have a website for the Work Optional Woman?
Soon
Soon?
it will be up.
Okay.
Well, maybe by the time
Okay. We can link to
this
that.
is
All right.
published. Yeah, we'll link to that on social. I'm at Work Optional Woman. And yeah, I really appreciate
You
this.
bet.
Had fun talking
Well,
to you. Yeah.
Thanks for being my first international guest. So this has been great. I appreciate you. Appreciate your time. Thanks for listening, everyone. And we will be back again with another episode soon.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Another episode of The Gentle Art of Crushing It. It was an amazing episode. We know we sure learned a lot, and we hope you did as well. We want to take a second and thank you so much for viewing or listening to this episode. And please just know that we only ask for one favor, and that is to make this life magnificent. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.